I want to welcome the GMs and the wives, the godly men and the warm, inviting, feminine, empathetic women out there. So, I did not get respect until I started to become more rare and valued my privacy. And what I mean by becoming more rare means essentially developing certain skill sets or having a certain specific kind of knowledge base in which you can give value based off of that skill set or knowledge base. And so for me specifically, the hole that I saw in society was the God-shaped hole. And I've had several people ask me what I mean by this God-shaped hole, and I mean to say that people do not have any semblance of praising something apart from themselves more often than they think, especially the religious people. I think that they completely misinterpret their idolization in some sense of the of scriptures or the Bible or the churches. I think there's some understanding that they're missing on their part. And this is not to say, because I follow Christ, but this is not to say that there's a degradation that is taking place. This is merely what I saw and what I continue to see to this day, and the antidote that I'm hoping to offer as a solution, because there really is only solutions. There really is no problems. And once I had this mindset, I was able to increase my vision of opportunity tenfold. And when you increase your vision of opportunity, something that happens is that the superfluousness of life really dissipates among the entirety of your existence. There is no more meaninglessness to life when your vision and your gaze is widened to see something beyond yourself. This is what I mean when I say the God-shaped hole. And so when I started to see this God-shaped hole, I started to realize also that I was seeing, in many senses of the word, a lack of privacy. People were so focused on sharing the personal details of their life to the degree in which didn't necessarily seem beneficial. I couldn't really tell if it was true. And so I was wondering, well, then if it's not beneficial and if it's not true, then why are these people displaying their lives on social media so much? Or why are these people gossiping about their lives behind people's back and everything? The most important aspect of your life is knowing when to be silent and when to speak. And those involve understanding whether or not what you're saying is beneficial and true, or if it's beneficial and true, but maybe it's not beneficial, but it is true. Well, you have to determine for yourself and have the proper discernment to determine when it is okay to disclose this kind of information. You know, it's like if somebody dies in the family and unexpectedly from, I don't know, something horrific happens. Do the kids need to necessarily know immediately what happened regarding the situation if the kids are like under 10 or 7 or something? Like, no, not necessarily. It's not that you're hiding the truth from them, but it's not necessarily beneficial to say the gory details and introduce a 7-year-old to the horrific nature of reality in a way that's going to traumatize them. So, and this is an exaggerated example, of course, for the purposes of this example, but nonetheless, we have to just understand the point is to know when it is okay to talk about something and when it's not. And so, even though I've been doing YouTube videos now for over a year and a half, now that we've got the Regal Change Academy set up, I'm online and I have a presence on other platforms, but YouTube is my primarily. I focus primarily on YouTube because that is seemingly to be where the consciousness is most gravitating toward, and the density of knowledge and truth seekers seem to be. It's not that I'm not on Instagram or I guess X now, not Twitter, but X and all of this stuff. It's not that I'm not on that, but it's my focus is YouTube, because there's a general yearning for a specific kind of knowledge, and that's why I'm on here. And I'm talking about things that I've learned in my life in the hopes to be a benefit to other people based off of what I've learned and how I've lived, so that other people don't have to necessarily go through the intense suffering that I had to go through. I've seen things that would make people's blood turn cold. I've seen horrific things in my life. And yet I still have this childlike wonder that has miraculously, only by the grace of God, stayed with me up until my adulthood. And now that I'm here in my adulthood and I'm perceiving reality to be as it is, my childlike wonder continues to grow. And I've noticed that my stoicism, my sense of being able to not necessarily compartmentalize my emotions, but controlling my emotions, has only been a more, I would say, not necessarily easy is the right word, but my emotions are not necessarily contingent upon how the externalities of my life are operating, and my emotions are not congruent with the externalities of my life anymore. I now understand myself that enough to where if I know that I need to rest, but I need to also get something done, I'm going to have to choose the thing to get done first, even though I really want to rest, even though I might feel burnt out. Because at least when I get that stuff done, I can rest knowing that I can just rest for that little bit. And I don't like taking rest days ever, really, anymore. I haven't taken a quote-unquote rest day for a year and a half, nearly. And the reason for that is because it's like when I say rest day, I mean vacation, no vacation. Even when I went to the Tetons last September, October, I was there because I was still trying to learn something. I was meeting people. I was engaging. I was there for a purpose. I wasn't necessarily there for the vacation, even though it was a great, beautiful place. I wasn't necessarily there, just to be there, because I've made an oath to myself that I'm not going to take any kind of vacation until I get to a certain point. And I don't even want to disclose what that point looks like at this moment, because I want to make sure that my destiny remains in my control. And this goes back into the privacy thing. And my destiny can only be in my control insofar as God allows it to be, and if it's in accordance to God's will. So if I'm going to be operating in accordance to God's will in the hopes to fulfill my own destiny, what I'm ultimately doing is being a vessel for God in any way, shape, and form that I can possibly be, so that I can ensure that I'm pleasing Him before anybody else. I understand what it's like to not put God first. I understand what it's like to not really develop a reverence for God, because that's really what the fear of God is ultimately a reverence for God above everything else. And I don't necessarily know if fear of God is even the right way to think about it. I think it's more about having a reverence for God, again, more so than anything or anyone else. And so this is where I started to learn discipline times 10. Like I was already disciplined, even though about 3 years ago I was nearly 200 pounds, maybe 3.5 years ago now. And I had to learn how to lose the weight, and it was very simple, but it's but it was also very complex to lose that weight. And I had to take on a lot of discipline to do so, because gluttony was one of my greatest sins. Gluttony and sloth and lust were the three that I would say were my most negatively influential sins of my life. And so when I finally got a discipline on those things and I repented from those things, it made life a lot more worth living in many senses of the word. And the more that I worked on myself, especially over the last 3.5 years, my spiritual awakening was 5.5 years ago. And I kind of like floated around in the ether of spirituality for about 1.5 years, just learning as much knowledge as I possibly could about anything I could get my hands on that was related to enlightenment or spirituality or greater discernment or alchemy or psychology. Anything. I was just taking it all in, because I wanted to make sure that I had as much knowledge as possible, only to realize down the line that all of the knowledge that I wanted to accumulate is fine, but ultimately it's not going to get me closer to me. I didn't know who I was. Like, I can learn all of these things about everything else, but if I don't know who I am, then what's the point? And this goes back to the main topic for today, which is not getting any respect until you become rare. And you yourself have to become rare. And you have to realize that you yourself are rare, even unto yourself. Because when you realize that you are rare, even unto yourself, you're able to distinguish certain levels of reality that are going to be cohesive to the mechanism of greater understanding on existence and being at ease with who you really are and having the confidence to be who you are. And it's only when you value your privacy and your self-respect is when you get to a certain level of that point. And it was only when I was able to cast out everybody else's ideas about what I ought to be, or how I need to get this and I need to do that and I need to get that, I was able to distinguish the path that was meant truly for me alone. And it's not necessarily that my path was greater or less than anybody else's. It was that my footsteps had to be walking on this path alone. And this path had to be forged by me alone, with only God by my side, and only God in my ears, only God in my sight. So all of these things eventually led up to me understanding how when I respected myself, I suddenly started to get more respect from other people. And this is exactly what's going to be a determining factor in your life on how you operate. People are going to start to notice that you are operating at a level, and they might even not even know really truly what level you're operating on, but they know that something is different about you because you're making certain adjustments and taking action in your life, not only in front of the public, let's say, but behind closed doors as well. You're making certain adjustments to ensure the probability of what you want to envision for yourself to be happening and to actually see it come into fruition is only increasing every single day. And you have that mindset. You have the growth mindset. You don't have the stagnating, complacent mindset. And that's really the ultimate distinguishing factor in anybody who's anybody. And you don't have to have a big social following. You really don't have to have much apart from yourself, because there are people that have everything and yet they do not have who they are. I've seen so many people in my life. I wouldn't necessarily say, because I wouldn't necessarily say that I came from a poor background, but we definitely didn't have everything. And I definitely wouldn't say we came from a well-off background, but we had enough to keep us sustained. And so there was a real a real balance that I found, because I was able to meet people that were a little bit below the poverty line, but I was also able to meet people that were well above into the upper middle class. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me, because I saw how differently people behaved in certain social classes. And I saw how magnetic certain people can be even when they don't have that social class status per se. Because sometimes people think that the social status is equivalent to the financial status, and that is not the case in any way, shape, or form. And if you want any kind of magnificent example of that, look at Socrates. Socrates was an old man who was very wise, but he had like nothing. He didn't even write anything down. He was so fond of the human experience and was so totally himself that he didn't have to do any of this stuff that we kind of have to do in some way, shape, or form today in order to leave the kind of impact that he did. Even Jesus, another great example, that if you want to be more approaching it from a more divine and not practical, because there is definitely more proof to say that Socrates existed more than Jesus, as far as my research is concerned, and as far as I can tell from other people's research is concerned. But that does not mean that Jesus wasn't around, and that doesn't mean that I don't follow Jesus, because as I said at the beginning of this video, I follow Christ. So, but I'm not a Christian. I want to make that clear as well, because this is not a religious channel. But anyway, Socrates is a great practical example of this, because he can leave that kind of impact without having to do anything. And he had the social status above all of these rich people. In fact, all of his friends were rich. Like, he had a bunch of people that were very rich and very wealthy, and they would feed him, and they loved him. And it was almost as if taking care of him was a gift, because they just got to be in his presence. like that's kind of what it seemed like in the stories that Plato writes about Socrates, and just the history in general. But nonetheless, what Socrates did was he valued his privacy, and he was able to respect himself, and that made him respectable to these other people. That's why they were able to do what they did, and how they cared for him the way that they did. So with all that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful, and until next time, peace be with you.